Okay, hello, my name is Hannah Hardy, and this is our brief introduction section. So I'm Hannah.
My name's Allison.
I'm Megan Boozer.
Hi, I'm Drew Starnes.
And welcome to our presentation of Analyzing Diversity Case Study. And we're going to go ahead and get started.
So the first thing we want to look at is the problem posed by the case study. So in this case study, we see that students want to create a gay-straight alliance. You may see that as a GSA. The principals feel that it will alienate other students, and they're kind of leaning towards not allowing it and allowing a different type of club. And the administrator suggests that a diversity group should be created instead. So varying perspectives for this case study. We have the students that are trying to create the GSA. They just want to be heard and included. We have the teacher who wants to support her students and be there and be that voice for them. We have the administrator that wants to try to make everything inclusive to try to avoid conflict within the school. We have the perspectives of other students, which might be supportive and agree with the club, or there might be conflicting views and might cause disagreements with the club being formed. And we also have parents that may be supportive or may also have conflicting views. So the challenges and opportunities that we see in this case study would be, we have the challenges would be student conflicts. There may be some disagreements. We have parent disapproval. There may be more calls to the school, parents coming up not wanting this club to be formed. So that would lead to a lot of disruption within the school. We also have opportunities. We have the opportunities to share awareness for what these students are wanting to create a club for. We have students that would now have a safe group and a club that fits their needs. It would also give them support and inclusion.
Okay, so some equitable outcomes for this case study would be meeting the diversity needs in the school with representation and building awareness within the diversity club. So I think it's important to discuss the difference between equitable and equal or equality. And this leads me to the next slide here. I did not create this. This is just a well-known picture on Google that you can find, but this is a great breakdown between the differences of equality versus equity and then justice. And equality, you see the three people that they all have equal boxes on the ground. They have an equal fence in front of them, and then they have the same thing playing on the other side of the fence. So everyone benefits from the same supports, is the assumption from equality. But it is very clear that the people being served through this equality are not all getting what they need. So equity is just that, giving everyone exactly what they need, the support to succeed, for example, this is in the classroom, academics wise, or giving them what they need with the difference of the levels of the boxes on the ground. So the first person being taller doesn't have a box, second person, and then third person with a taller box. But then if we move over to the end for justice, the barrier is completely moved. So it is not a fence that they can't see through anymore, but rather a fence where no one even needs a box to stand on. The barrier is completely gone. So without supports or accommodations, everyone can still see the game across the field, and that would be because the cause of the inequity was addressed. So this, I feel like, explains the difference between equality and equitable outcomes. So the equitable outcomes being that the students do get representation, but there are some immediate term responses. I'm going to move our bubbles around over here. Students feel invalidated and they're not represented when their club is shut down. So with the principal in this case study saying that we can just create a complete diversity club and not single out the one group that wants to be represented, these students may feel invalidated and not represented. The diversity team is created for representation, so other groups will be represented, and it's more of an overarching or umbrella type fix and to across all communities. So there are some positives with that. And then another immediate term response would be parent concerns, like we discussed earlier in the presentation, and then student anger and confusion, wondering why their specific community can't be represented, why it has to go under the umbrella of everything else of diversity as a whole. So those are immediate, and then longer term policy and practice adjustments could be to make considerations for club members to feel represented and not in the broad spectrum or umbrella of diversity, as I just discussed. Taking a deep dive into the community concerns for this club with parent and community surveys. It's always a great idea to reach out with surveys to get parent and community input, as well as the staff surveys and input collection. Getting the stakeholders' views from all stakeholders is very important with everything, especially starting a new club that could raise concerns. Revisit the decision when more information is collected and decide on the best next steps for the representation of these students. So these are just longer term adjustments that the school could make, since in the case study, the principal did shut it down and say, this is my decision. We're only going to do a diversity club completely. These are some ideas that maybe could, once there is further information and more time put into it, that these policy and adjustments could possibly happen.
Okay, so for the action plan, as I was researching this, I was a little surprised to find that the principal cannot tell them that they would just have to do a diversity club, that that's actually against the Federal Equal Access Act, depending on the school formation requirements for clubs. So the first step as the advisor to this group would be to professionally and respectfully inform them of the principal's decision. So I know that while the teacher may be frustrated and feel kind of in between a rock and a hard place, it would be important not to let their professionalism slip, but to let the students know where the principal felt in the initial decision. The next thing would be to share information on the Federal Equal Access Act. A club cannot be required to change its name because other clubs don't have to do that. And this has been something that the Supreme Court has ruled on several times in prior cases. So then it would be about investigating what the policy is for this particular school on forming clubs. If a club has to have a faculty sponsor, and they did tried to get a faculty sponsor and all of the other rules were followed, then the principal cannot deny them access to being a club or change the name, because none of the other clubs at school are required to go by a broader term name for a club. So this would be something where the students would need to know basically their rights, and also what their next steps would be. So one thing that the advisor could do, or at least invite the students to do, it needs to be student-led. So if the students don't take action, then it stops there. But as the advisor, they could at least inform students of their rights and their next courses of action or steps. So one idea might be connecting with other student GSAs across the country who may have experienced similar situations and ask for their input on how they proceeded and what they did in order to form that club at their school. The next thing would be revisit the principal's decision. Once all of the legal information has been gathered, once they've talked to some other GSAs and seen what they had to go through in order to get their club formed, they would probably want to prepare a presentation to directly address the principal's primary concerns in the case study. So the mission statement and the rationale, why this specific club for these specific students, what would be the benefit. Respond directly to the suggestion of the diversity club and explain why that might not be in the best interest of these students and their ultimate goal. The purpose. So a lot of the GSA support documents said that one of the main things to do before you start the club is decide what direction you want to take it. Is it more of a social place for students to gather and support each other? Is it going to be more support in the sense of a lot of times students coming from these demographics don't necessarily have a lot of support at home. So is this a place for them to support each other, learn about different resources, and have allies at school that they feel can support them and help them through difficult times, and have a sense that there are people at school who are friendly and supportive to them. And then, is this an activist group? So are they trying to push for any broader awareness in the community or online, or what is their activism goal if they have one as a club? Activities and meeting topics. So what are some things the principal could expect to be happening in these meetings, and what would be topics that they would be discussing? And then establishing some club norms. A lot of schools that do try to get rid of a GSA or deny GSA, usually it has to do with safe harbor provisions. And what that means is that the principal would need to know that the club is committed to making sure that there's not any kind of content that could be graphic or controversial in nature. And so that would be something that the principal needs to be assured they are aware of and will be addressed. The last thing is, if the principal is still not receptive, enlisting parental and legal support if the school continues to refuse the club's admittance.
Okay, so the first question we're looking at was Miss Livingworth's suggestion that Lorraine and her peers start a club rather than a GSA an equitable one? Why or why not? How is a diversity club different from a GSA? We felt that this was certainly not an equitable decision for the LGBTQ community. That particular group of students felt ostracized from their fellow classmates already, and a decision like this is only going to further that feeling in the school environment. The students wanted a safe place to discuss the specific issues that were facing their particular group. Taking that away from them is unfair. A diversity club sounds like somewhere where diversity is celebrated. The LGBTQ students wanted a group that was going to help their peers better understand them and teach them how to appropriately interact with each other. If I was in, or if we were in Miss Green's shoes, would you have argued vigorously in the support of a GSA? If so, and how? We believe we would have put up more of a fight than she did, although I'm sure there's more in real life if this actually did happen to the situation that occurred. We would have requested a separate meeting after we're able to gather some data about the student population and research other GSA programs at other schools, like we discussed in our action plan. We then would have presented this information to principal so that she could make a more informed decision. At that point, if she was still unreceptive, like we discussed, we would have to go an alternate route. We also felt that student and community involvement could possibly help drive this decision in our favor. The more students that are involved in something, typically the school feels more comfortable with it, and the decision usually falls in the way that the students want it to go. Last question is, what ways can Ms. Green support the students' efforts to create a safer community for themselves while also complying with Ms. Livingworth's request? Ms. Green would have to use the diversity club to educate the students about the specific issues that certain groups of students were facing around the school, as opposed to it just being the GSA. It would probably be more broad and contain other issues as well. Another way to make the club more meaningful would be to have the community involvement meet outside of school hours. In school, we feel like students always buy in or participate more when they see their faculty donating their time outside the classroom. They realize the teachers are then invested into the same situation and problems within the school. Perhaps the diversity club could employ a guest speaker to the school to discuss these issues with the entire student body. Sometimes an outsider's perspective seems to really help other students as opposed to just hearing from the teachers that they see every day.
All right, so that is our presentation, and we thank you so much for watching. And this is just a credit slide for the presentation graphics and information on the slides. But thank you so much. That concludes our presentation.